Good evening and welcome to Awaaz Presents International Women's Day 2021. My name is Navkiran Mann. I'm one of 5 producers working at the City of Culture within the Collaborative Cities team, and we work specifically with communities in Coventry. And it's my honour to work in Foes Hill and Longford, which are the most vibrant and diverse parts of our city. For those who can't see me, I'm a black-haired brown woman with dark brown eyes, and I'm wearing an embroidered shalwar kameez with pink, green and purple colours. We champion and value lived experience as equal to professional qualifications. There will be stories, personal stories, shared about real people's lives, and we ask you to respond sensitively. We recognise that some of what you hear tonight may be triggering for some of you, and we've put together helplines which are on the link where you booked your ticket. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Let me introduce you to your hosts, Sandeep Verdi and Jiti Samra from Awaaz.
Thank you, Nav, and everyone else involved in taking us through this journey with Awaaz. Why am I here? To share some of my personal experiences and observations with you. From a personal journey of being born and brought up here in Coventry into a traditional Punjabi household, you knew or you were told you don't ask questions, you don't understand, you're a child, be quiet. Our mothers, grandmothers had respect, duty ingrained in their being. Our mothers are our first teachers. They were silenced with similar statements as I and generations before, and still continuing with families all over. Duty and ijat. I'm not criticizing my parents. I love my parents and they loved me. But there are certain unsaid rules that you knew. They, as well as my grandparents, had also conformed to what was expected of them throughout their lives without question. As Michelle Obama said, no country can ever truly flourish if it stifles the potential of its women and deprives itself of the contribution of half its citizens. Her quote, it speaks of a country, but this is applicable in the context of the family. We know that there are different forms of control and stifling, stamping the spirit of a girl, developing from an early age. If you have no voice, your views and opinions shut down. How are you going to flourish to your full potential? You subconsciously suppress your thoughts and aspirations. This also opens the question that if you don't have something, how do you know the value? Our families travelled from abroad for a better life for themselves, their children and their families back home. If the first generation of women had not joined men, they would not have excelled and had the financial security we all have. Women went through struggles, bringing up families, sending money back home, working hard alongside the menfolk, enduring hardship and mistreatment at times, forgetting their own dreams. Women as children were dutiful, first to their parents, brothers, their sisters, their husbands, then their children, and it doesn't stop there, because now they're silenced by their grandchildren too. In the community, if they go to social or support groups, they have group facilitators making decisions for them. There are many examples, but ones that stuck with me that I saw in disbelief. Attending a group with managers was a group of intelligent, mature women practically shouted out that they were not allowed. That was by an Asian woman manager in Hindi. The women had made a collective action decision. Another time, an Asian manager for older people, he was stating, they don't understand what you've said. because the women had said they'd join in an activity that had been directly asked of them in English by a professional health worker. He didn't like it. These are sadly the gatekeepers. I remember the managers in the NHS Trust and other community services stating they won't understand, they won't take part, they're hard to reach. These professionals made assumptions, as people do, because of the way they looked, because of the way they appeared, dressed wearing traditional clothes, salwar kameez, spoke, their hair tied back, elderly, always silent, their voice always being silenced by everyone. What people do forget is that these women, these elderly women, are the mothers and wives, the first teachers of those successful professionals and entrepreneurs everyone admires and aspires to be like. Through our work in the city, we showed that given the freedom, the encouragement and the empowerment, these same women successfully are running groups across Coventry and all over the country independently, gaining recognition for their community work, knitting, donating to baby neonatal units in hospitals and to charities all over here and abroad, having yoga sessions, which at the time our managers were told by these gatekeepers, our women won't do it. The library service, who were saying that books weren't needed in different languages anymore and they're underused. So we had workers from the library services come out, and from that, the library service changed the way they worked to ensure that women access the books. They bring them to the groups and the women use them, and the service is now flourishing. These same ladies join in with other communities with activities and events across the city, organising events, going on holiday abroad. They had been recognised by statutory organisations, receiving local and national awards such as the Queen's Award, the Godiva Woman of Achievement Award, and many more. However empowered and encouraged, I observed this generation of women still fall silent. The power, tone, and body language used by these gatekeepers, individuals, still returns the woman back to a mindset of the obedient girl. Even though they are independent individuals with the same right as everyone else, they take their Awaaz. If you take somebody's voice away, you strip them of their identity.
Thank you, Jiti. We have learned a lot from Jiti's observation, but I'm sure many of you might be thinking, oh, this must be a story of past, a different generation, different time. That doesn't happen anymore. Well, I used to think that too, until I realized from my own personal and professional observations, the same attitude towards women. We have to realize that this behavior instilled in us has a deeper impact on our mental and physical health. It has been passed on unintentionally from generation to generation. How sad is that? We hear the word breakdown. And we simply think of major life events or traumas, such as relationship breakup, death of loved ones, or serious illnesses. But I'm saying to you that any woman, especially in leadership roles, will go through many, many breakdowns. And what are we doing? Are we supporting these women? Are we supporting these change makers? Are we nurturing these people? Or are we just breaking them? Mental health stigma is the topic itself. We could do with another session. We could definitely do another session because it is a serious matter. It is a serious topic. Because the interpretation of mental health in Asian culture is mad, meaning pagal, pagal, mad. Why would you talk about it then? Would you dare to talk about it the minute you hear the word mad? Very sad. So today I would like to highlight that we need to understand human emotions, the suppression of emotions, and the support system, not just labeling someone with words like depressed. What do we do? What can we do? To make positive changes, reclaiming your voice does not mean women will lose their identity or they will lose their culture. We have to be honest by having open discussions and debates. We need to have a platform, safe environment to talk about these intergenerational issues. For this, today we are going to launch our manifesto. Number one, choose to challenge, because from challenge comes change. If you don't challenge it, you can't change it. I choose to challenge. I'm not going to remain silent. Number two, empowerment. We need the power. Power is not a negative word. We need the power to make changes. And we cannot wait for somebody to come and give us the power. We all have the power within ourselves. We want everyone to reach to their highest potential. And we need to learn to accept ourselves. And that's the most important thing. From my personal experience, it was a struggle. It was a struggle to accepting yourself. Not easy, I'm saying that, but I had to overcome many barriers. Simple things like my accent, the way I look, or stumbling on some words. How am I going to chair the meeting? How am I going to talk about this? These simple basic things, I had to overcome that. In fact, I turned them into my strength. My accent, well, it makes me unique. Number four, celebrate our positive role models. Now that's the key thing. You know, from my personal experience, that I can talk about many books, my library background, I can say certain good words, but I must say that learning from our great historical women, the one who have actually walked that path, it's kind of inspirational itself, really. So we must share the stories of the great women in our history. We can learn a lot from their courage, strengths. I would like to encourage everyone to read about Maharani Jind Kaur, known as Maharani Jinda. She was the great queen of Sikh Empire. See the word Maharani, meaning the great queen. And why do we do that? Why do we show so much respect? Because there are many other historical women I can count, but I'm just taking that particular example there because I can talk on and on and on about her stunning personality, beauty, leadership skills, courage. I don't know where she was getting all that courage. She proclaimed herself as the regent. She reviewed the troops. She held court and transacted state business in public. Can you think? A woman at that time? How did she do it? Where did she get the courage from? What qualification did she have? How? How did she do it? I always questioned myself, and I learned a lot from that. I think we should have these type of stories. There are many more names, as I said, I can mention in every school, in every library, so that girls can learn from their history. Let's move on to number 5, gender equality. Today, we are not going to go into major issues such as pay gaps, gender pay gaps. We're going to get our basics right. We're going to talk about our basics. Simple thing, men can help at home. And we definitely need to change these type of mentalities and judgments towards women, that at a certain age, you have to get married. You have to have children. You have to give birth to a boy. Who said that? And why? Number 6, we need to be open. Let's talk about good and bad. Let's learn from each other. Let's talk about how it feels to be silenced. If we don't talk and brush issues under the carpet, then we are destroying our culture, our freedom, our voice. And finally, number 7, we have to honor the struggle of the past. We have to celebrate the gain of the present. We have to challenge for a better future.
Thank you, Sandeep and Jiti. Now, I know there's a lot to unpack in there, and in a short while, we'll be opening up the floor to your questions. So if you have some questions, please put them in the chat with the capital Q, and we'll try and get to as many of you as possible. Before we introduce our guest for this evening, we have some prose written by one of the Awaaz writers, Raj Kaur.
Hi, everybody. I have always said my life is not a straight line. It's a graph full of ups and downs, a continuous roller coaster ride, which many will not enjoy. Do I have regrets? Yes, some, if not many. Am I disappointed? Yes, I am, but also grateful for people who I met on my journey. Do I resent? Yes, sometimes, but mostly I feel I'm okay and will not trade myself for anything. Am I lonely? Yes, I am most times, but mostly I feel like I mostly like my company. I have great friends. Do I regret being single? Yes, I do miss having intimate relationship with someone. Growing up, I had this romantic image of myself growing old with someone. I do miss someone. They're just for me. Do I feel less of a woman? Yes, sometimes, to be honest, I do, but I then choose my life, and mostly I do feel nourishing, empowering, emotional woman. No man has made me feel that way. Only one came near to doing so. Am I destructive? Yes, I am. I do panic when things get easier and I press self-destructive button. Who I am? Who am I? Who am I? Never really been able to figure out. People I now have different versions of me, their own way of interpreting me. But what I think of myself, don't know. I'm not perfect, have many faults, did some bad stuff, but on whole I feel I'm best version of myself when I'm helping and reaching out to people. Sometimes I do feel I have split personality. I do want to discover myself, finding myself, being able to answer all the questions I have about my existence. Not what others think, but what I feel about myself. How do I describe myself? Who am I really? What makes me happy, sad, anxious, accomplished? I think we all want to discover ourselves. We are defined by the deeds and things we do under the scrutiny of people around us. But do we know really who we are? Let's dig deep. And I'm writing this to unclutter my brain. And in the process, I want to find myself. Deep down, I know I am afraid to face my real me. I'm ashamed of the past I try to hide. But, till, but will there ever be time to get the beast loose and tame it once it has unleashed its fury? Maybe, don't know. It might, or it might not. But I want to try. I want to give myself a chance to unleash my demons on paper. Let them dance around me and not just in my head. I want to feel peace, happy, calm, and reach my potential. So to start, I need to go where it all started, my conception. Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much, Dav. I'd like to introduce our special guest for this evening, Raj Kaur. She's a feminist and activist. She's the founder of Pink Ladoo movement. She's the author of stories for South Asian Supergirls and The Night the Reindeer Saved Christmas. Raj, welcome to Awaaz Presents International Women's Day. It's a real honor to have you with us. Just unpack for us a little bit what Pink Ladoo is and why you started it.
Hi everyone, and thank you for taking the time out this evening to, attend this talk. I really appreciate it, and I hope you find it insightful. And if you have any questions, like Navkiran said before, please put them in the chat box and we will try and answer. So Pink Ladoo, it is quite a complicated explanation, I guess, but the simplest one I can give is that I am committed to anti-oppression work. And I have always taken, great umbrage with the issue of gender equality. I've tried to deal with it in many different ways over the course of my life, but I always found myself asking, what is the best way to deal with this? Now, being a biologist and also being a lawyer, I thought, okay, let's do some root cause analysis here. And I constantly found myself asking, where did sexism come from? It didn't just, did it fall out of the sky? Did we literally just wake up one day and everyone was sexist? No, somebody somewhere at some point in history decided they wanted to make people believe that women were inferior to men. So how did they go about doing that? Well, in my opinion, they did that by creating systems of tradition and customs that financially penalized families with girls to gradually lower women's value and make it undesirable to be a woman and to have women in your family. To me, that is the root cause of sexism. And I thought, okay, well, I need to deal with this by tackling sexist customs. So I'm going to take down dowry. Yep, I'm going to absolutely eliminate dowry. And then I thought, it's actually really unreasonable to expect a woman who has, heard sexist comments and lived through sexist customs her entire life to one day wake up at the age of 25 and have all this, sort of sentience and confidence and be able to say no to dowry. I think when we make statements like that, we are expecting a tremendous lot of womanhood without appreciating the struggle that we are brought up in. And so I thought we have to start at the beginning. And the very first custom that a South Asian child, boy or girl, will encounter is the custom of only celebrating the birth of a boy. And I thought, if I can convince the South Asian community to celebrate girl births, I will, one, create a new custom that elevates women, and two, encourage South Asian families to critically engage with custom and tradition and stop with the blind adherence. And hopefully, the next time they are faced with a sexist custom, they will think twice. I personally believe that sexist customs and traditions are very dangerous. They are like intergenerational propaganda that very subtly spread the message that women are inferior to men. And I think they need to be dealt with. If we are going to deal with sexism, we must deal with its causes. So that's a bit about Pink Ladoo. I inspire families to celebrate the births of their daughters, but this is the logic behind the campaign.
So traditionally, if a boy is born, you give out those golden ladoos and you celebrate it, and people commiserate when a girl's born, and they say things like, well, next time you'll have a boy. So this is the tradition that you're sort of fighting against. And tell us a little about the impact that's had globally since you launched it.
So when I launched Pink Ladoo, it was a very interesting time on social media. Facebook was sort of reaching its peak within, just the general community, and Instagram was rising. And we were the first South Asian feminist movement within the diaspora. The response was immense. The following took off instantly. I had tens of thousands of followers from the diaspora. I have a very small following in India. It's worth noting it's majority diaspora women. I, received press coverage everywhere, been in The Guardian, on Sky News, BBC Breakfast. Like, it was just, the public really responded. And almost instantly, people started giving out Pink Ladoo to celebrate their girls. And this was always one of my tactics, that I needed to fake it till I make it. I need to make it look like lots of people are celebrating their girls. And then eventually it will become a trend and everyone will start doing it. But I didn't have to fake it for too long because people really it just took off. And I think, I don't know the actual number, but I'm in touch with some sweet shops who give me counts. And I know that to date, thousands of girls have been celebrated with Pink Ladoo. So it's, I would say it's probably been more successful than I imagined.
So one person starting a global movement is quite something. Did you have any idea that it would have so much impact when you started it?
No, and I'm a big believer that you should, learn to walk the hill before you fantasize about climbing the mountain. And I'm very conscious that when you start a movement, it can be very tempting to fantasize about global domination and becoming this and that. And I think that kind of attitude can become very quickly demotivating because you have to enjoy and relish in the 1 billion steps before that goal, even if you ever make it to that goal. So I always try to sort of, retain a laser sharp focus with this and remind myself that even if only one girl has been celebrated, it was worth it. And I think that's what keeps me grounded and it stops me from spiraling, into inferiority complexes.
And what's nice about your movement is it's online, so people can access it, and people actually post photos of their girls, and the whole online global community cheer them on. So they may not have that celebration within their nuclear family, but they have that within their global family. And I think that's what people have really engaged with. So moving on from Pink Ladoo to the children's book that you wrote, Stories for South Asian Supergirls. Tell us a bit about that.
So Stories for South Asian Supergirls is a collection of biographies of 50 notable women throughout history. There are contemporary figures and there are historical ones as well. When I first launched Pink Ladoo in 2015, I started sharing stories about notable South Asian women in history for my followers, as part of we need to elevate the status of women. And, a few years later, Rebel Girls came out and I thought, oh, great, I'm going to find some cool women in here. And then it wasn't very intersectional. And so I thought, there needs to be a South Asian specific resource. So that was the impetus behind it. But I mean, there was also a personal element in the sense that some of the women I was discovering when I started Pink Ladoo, I just could not believe that I hadn't heard of these women. I was in my early 30s. How had I gotten to the age of like 31 or 32 without knowing some of their names? And I think one that stuck out the most for me is Kalpana Chawla. So she was the first South Asian woman into space, and she died in the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster, which was in 2003. And the fact that I didn't know about that really blew my mind, because I think it really speaks to the media's representation of South Asian women. This was in 2003. So South Asian women were very much being depicted in the South Asian in media, but it was a post 9/11 era, and we were being depicted as these poor victims that needed saving. We were in hijabs and everybody needed to bomb the Middle East to liberate us. At the same time as that narrative was spinning, there was a South Asian woman going into space, but nobody thought to cover that story. It was much easier to, spin the other narrative. And I take great issue with that. And I think that, that needs to change. The view of South Asian women and just, ethnic minority women in general needs to change. And I hope that the book tackles that.
So could you pick out a couple of examples from your book of South Asian activists, past and present, that have really inspired you?
So the first biography I shortlisted for the book was a woman named Preetam Kaur. She is 95 years old at the moment. She is illiterate and uneducated, and she lives in Vancouver. And Preetam was at the forefront of a protest in the 1980s, not too dissimilar from the farmers' protest we are seeing right now in Delhi. She was doing this protest in Vancouver, and she was campaigning for farmers' rights. And she was instrumental in setting up the Canadian Farm Workers Union. She went on to become their vice president, but she was at the forefront of providing, labor rights to people who did manual labor and who had no status or respect in that society, and who were often not only getting very ill because of the treatment and condition that they were working under, but were also dying. So I just couldn't believe it. This woman, you know, she looked like my grandma. Like, she wore a Punjabi suit and she had a chunni and she can't read and she can't write. And, you know, she changed the course of an entire generation of laborers. And I just, yeah, she really sticks out in my mind. And then a historical figure that I think about a lot actually is also Maharani Jind Kaur. And I think about Jind a lot, not only because she was the grandmother of Sophia Duleep Singh, who we never hear about, who was an instrumental suffragette, who has been basically whitewashed out of the suffragette narrative and the women's, vote movement. I think about Maharani Jind Kaur because she was instrumental in terrifying the British, if I'm completely honest. She was Queen Regent, like Jiti, I think it was Jiti or Sandeep mentioned. She was Queen Regent because her son was 5 years old when he took the throne, and she was quite aware that the British would manipulate him, and so she assumed the role of Queen Regent. And I think about her because, you know, that the narrative that is spun about Punjabi women from that period is that we were weak and we were savages and we were living in huts and we didn't know what was good for us. But actually the reality is very different. We were fighting wars, we were planning uprisings, we were trying to take down a global imperialist power. We were doing a lot. And, you know, Jind's son was forcibly separated from her. She went into exile when, you know, he was very little. And then Maharaja Duleep Singh was actually made the godson of Queen Victoria and brought to England under, you know, false pretenses. And they kept them separate because they knew that if he was, kept together with his mother, he would develop ideas about reclaiming his throne. And so I think about her a lot. I think about where she got her confidence from and where she got her power and her energy from, and what it means to hail from that type of Sikh woman in my own legacy.
And Maharani Jind Kaur story is personal to me because I grew up in the era where Topsy and Tim was the stories that I had at school. Shows my age, but my mom used to tell me Maharani Jind Kaur story as a bedtime story, that she took off her petticoat, like the soldiers were starting to give up. This was the fight for Punjab, and she took off her petticoat. She's like, I'm going to fight to the death. And she took her sword off and she said, I'm going to fight to the death. And that's who you are. So for me, that's where my stories of my identity came from. It was my bedtime stories, but I didn't see them represented in the sort of media and literature and arts world around me. But my provocation for the panel is, how can we amplify the voices of South Asian women and activists in art, theatre, literature and media so there is more accurate representation, moving away from stereotypical narratives of South Asian women as victims and increasing our visibility as warriors? So that first question to you, Raj.
I think we just take ownership, and if our stories aren't being written, we write them ourselves. And I don't know if that answers the question, but I remember when I wanted to get my book published, and I sat down and I was Googling, like, how do you get a book published? And everyone was like, go and find an agent, go and find this. And I just thought, I don't really want to live in a world where I put this book together and I go to whoever and I have an old white man tell me that there isn't a market for my book. So, you know, I found an Asian publisher and I sort of got it out there, and it is what it is today. But yeah, it's difficult. I mean, this is something I grapple with all the time, about how do we change the narrative about us? And I guess it's just opening the conversation and sharing our own stories. It's you know, spoken word, like what Dab was doing, and it's, you know, frank and open conversations like Sandeep was saying, and it's encouraging people to make books available in different languages like Jiti has done. So it's all of this, you know, different work, but it's story sharing, it's narrative sharing. And story sharing, you know, people talk a lot about it's important to share your story, but for me, I know that the power in story sharing for Pink Ladoo has been that often many women will go through these sexist experiences and they feel like it's happening because of some own personal failure of theirs. And when they come online and they read a story that there's some woman in some other country who went through the exact same thing as me, they realized, oh, A, I'm not alone, but B, maybe it's not about me. like, maybe it's not my fault after all. Like, if this is happening to thousands of women everywhere, maybe it's not because I'm a failure, maybe this is society. So I think sharing your story is incredibly powerful for that reason. I think it gives other people hope, and it makes them see that what they're going through isn't because of their own failure or something that's wrong with them. It's a societal issue. So yeah, I guess I don't know if I've answered that question, but
it is quite a big question. And over to you, Sandeep. How do we amplify the voices of South Asian women and activists so there's more representation across the arts and media and literature?
I think Raj has given a very good answer. I would just like to add a few bits from my personal experience, from a very basic level. What we're saying, that is the when you go through all these issues, all these problems, all these things are happening to you, and you know that you're not the only one, and you definitely have got the history behind you. You can learn a lot from it, but there is a missing gap here. So that missing gap is when these things happen to you, you do feel you're the only one. You do feel it, you do actually go into your kind of isolation mode where you find it, you struggle to talk about it. And it's easier for me to talk about anything now, but I think when you are in a very professional capacity, you kind of fear a lot because you don't want anybody to know about these things, and most of the things are hidden, quite hidden, because these are hidden agendas, and you cannot, and you lose trust. You don't even know who you can talk to. So I think we have to understand these real issues, and before we get into the other thing where we could say, like, yes, definitely we can talk about empowerment, we can talk about building somebody, but that's the first priority, because we all are going to face certain issues, and that's the reality out there. And how we're going to tackle that, and how we're going to create more awareness so that you feel comfortable, that you feel somewhere that you can talk to, somebody you can talk to. I hope if I've answered the question, but I can carry on.
Jiti, would you like to respond?
Yeah, well, I think you've covered it, both of them have, but I think we have to change our attitudes when it comes to career choices. We have to, there used to be, and it was fear from the parents, and I can say from the older people. I mean, I'm a mother, I've got 2 adult children, I've got nephews, nieces, and I will say, you have to be happy in what you do as a career choice. And as parents, you have to be a bit open and listening and understanding. The world out there has changed so much. Our happiness, our career choices, the opportunities out there. Just because it's a girl does not mean that she can only do certain careers. And it is like when we're saying that it's equal at home, where the man of the house, or the parents, or the husband, or their partner, he has to take equal. It's a partnership. Our future is a partnership when you're in a marriage, or if you're in a relationship. And for girls to actually be shown these stories you've got in your book. I mean, I learned a lot reading them. You hear about all the authors, you see people on the telly, and you sort of think, she's written that book. But when they're all put together, you're actually sort of seeing it. That's empowering, because you think we can do it. And if we show our parents, or older generation, and I'm part of it, we're guilty at times. You don't realize the discrimination you are doing yourself. And sometimes it's fear. You just want your children to be happy and get on. Now, these books should be in libraries. They should be going out there to be, different communities, to educate everybody. I think
there's a lot in there, Jiti, talking about like the education and the information, but you're also talking about talent pipelines and creating opportunities in all these spheres of influence. So you're seeing more role models, so that people are encouraged to take up space within arts and culture. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been a real pleasure to host this for you.